So thank you. We have two economic sessions for this afternoon. As I said, the economy underpins the relationship. The last one, investment and trade. And this one is really slightly different because the subject is the knowledge economy. We all recognise that we add value through the smarts in our economy, taking advantage of our technological advantages, etc. And what we're really looking at is that what we can learn from each other, what Australia can learn from the US experience and what the US might learn from ours. And a little like the subject we were at this morning on energy, where the domestic policies of the US, even though our economies in terms of natural resource development are very similar, the US has gone down a different policy route. Policy route that basically says that you, for energy security reasons and other reasons, you don't export all your product. You ensure that you use it to also bolster your domestic economy, to bolster your capacity to manufacture competitively, for example. Similarly, in this instance, when we look at the policies that each of the US and Australia are adopting in relation to the knowledge economy and advanced manufacturing in particular, we see a slightly different emphasis. And to help us along this path, we have a video which was an interview by me, and after you see that, you'll know why I'll never be a challenge to John Barron's job, of Jason Miller and Kevin Kolevar. Now, Jason Miller has been the key person at the White House that's been responsible for the development and implementation of President Obama's Advanced Manufacturing Partnership. And Kevin Kolevar has been the key person at the Dow Chemical Company, industry side in the US, that's worked in support of Andrew Liveris, who's been the key person out front working with Miller and with Susan Hartfield from MIT in the development of that advanced manufacturing policy. And I think it's, from an Australian perspective, it's really quite interesting to see how it's come about and where it's going.
Well, gentlemen, thank you for joining us this morning from Washington, DC. From an Australian perspective, the President sponsoring an advanced manufacturing partnership is interesting in itself. And so I'd really like to know is, how did this come about? You know, whose idea was it? What were the driving influences that started this process off?
Sure. So to understand what led us to launching the Advanced Manufacturing Partnership, to go back to 2010. In 2010, it was February of 2010 was the first month that the United States economy added jobs coming out of the Great Recession, the financial crisis. Right, the immediate focus of the President's economic team in 2009 and 2010 was restarting growth, which a lot of which involved, frankly, putting out fires, dealing with the immediate aftermath of the recession, dealing with the financial crisis, getting our banking sector back in a place where it was functional again. And one of the aspects of dealing with that crisis was a deep look at the auto industry. General Motors and Chrysler were undergoing a potential event that could have led to their liquidation, in part because there was no capital available, in part because sales for autos were falling through the floor at the time. And I think that experience, looking very deeply at the role that the auto industry plays more broadly in the economy, and the role that those two companies played more broadly in the economy, led the President's economic team, the President himself, to recognize that as we were restarting growth coming out of the recession, we really needed a renewed focus and a renewed emphasis on U.S. manufacturing, which had languished for quite a while. So in 2010, the President was really pushing his economic team to place a renewed emphasis on U.S. manufacturing. As part of that, he created, for the first time, a specific team within the White House, what's called the White House Office of Manufacturing Policy, which I lead, that looks specifically at the manufacturing sector. Now, at that same time as we were developing a manufacturing policy at the federal level, we were talking to a number of leaders in business and academia. In particular, we had a meeting with Susan Hockfield and the Massachusetts Institute of Technology that was looking more broadly at their role at revitalizing American manufacturing, both in terms of how they educate students, but also the role that MIT can play more broadly in terms of inspiring engineering universities across the country to get more involved in helping strengthen our manufacturing sector. And of course,
she was president of MIT at that time,
president of MIT at that time, and of course Andrew Liveris, the CEO of Dow, who at that time was quite loudly talking about the importance of manufacturing within the U.S. economy, and we were consulting quite a bit with him on some of the things that were needed from both a policy level and steps that the business community needed to take to strengthen manufacturing. As we were having those conversations, there was a separate group of advisors, the President's Council of Advisors on Science and Technology, which tends to be folks who are very focused on science, deep science and technical problems. And that group was looking at the risk associated with losing manufacturing and what that could do to the United States innovation engine. So you had a renewed emphasis as we were trying to drive job creation coming out of the recession, where the president was pushing his economic team. You had deep discussions with both business leaders and academia. And you had the president's advisors on science and technology saying, look, if we don't focus on manufacturing right now, we're really putting our future innovation at risk. And so a handful of people, the president, Ron Bloom, who was the president's top advisor on manufacturing at the time, Gene Sperling, the president's top economic advisor, myself, and others, came up with the idea of bringing folks like Andrew Liveris, Susan Hockfield, and other leaders together to provide a concerted, really national approach to supporting advanced manufacturing in the United States.
So you found
and
Andrew,
with that came
did you? He didn't find you.
Andrew?
Yeah. You found Andrew, he found you.
Yeah, and there had been a number of conversations with Andrew up to that point in time, as you can imagine. But really, we, with Andrew and Susan, they were based on all of the discussions we'd had to date, it was very clear that those were the two natural leaders for this effort to represent business and represent universities and research institutions. And with them, we developed a team of 12 leading CEOs and 6 university presidents that were our inaugural Advanced Manufacturing Partnership Steering Committee.
What were the outcomes? What were the key policy initiatives that you believed would help take America to the next stage in terms of advanced manufacturing?
I think from my standpoint, and then Jason, I'll turn it over to you. We had a lot, and without going through all of them, on some of them, some of the macroeconomic policies, you can imagine what they are, right? With businesses pushing, an interest in a lower corporate tax rate and less regulation where possible. Of course, those will come out of any kind of look like that, and they're important. But when we dove down into the more specific policies, I think we really started to dig into the workforce issues that we have in this country, and notwithstanding the multitude of absolutely outstanding training institutions, we still have severe workforce needs in this country. And when we brought these out and really pulled on these to identify what the drivers were for some of the shortages, it was clear to everyone that more needed to be done. And this is a space that the administration has stepped into with great rigor and has been leading, I think, a very important charge.
So education and training was a key outcome.
So one of the key recommendations, one of the key areas of work that we had been doing with the Advanced Manufacturing Partnership was looking at this gap, bridging between basic and applied research in the lab and product development and production in the factory. And this led to what we call our Manufacturing Innovation Institutes. We have launched 4 Manufacturing Innovation Institutes focused on 4 different technology areas. Each one of those institutes is a combination of federal investment matched by non-federal investment, primarily from industry. each institute is a consortium of businesses, universities, and local organizations that really connects research all the way to product development and production. And it's creating that important bridge, as well as creating a regional hub where this kind of expertise is developed over time. We've launched 4, as I said. We have 4 more that are going to be launched this year. And I think it's something that's really important for the infrastructure. If you think about infrastructure in the broadest sense, for the infrastructure of U.S. manufacturing in the years ahead.
And these have, I'll add too, Robert, these have been a smashing success. I think in the face of early skepticism, political figures that weren't sure it would ever get off the ground and others, industry responded boldly to the White House initiative and put many tens of millions of dollars of their capital on the line as matching funds to get these off the ground. Dow is just one of many that has been excited about the prospect and pursued partnership in some of them. And we see bipartisan support on Capitol Hill, which is something in kind of short supply lately here in Washington, D.C., for these institutes. It's something I think the White House should be very proud of.
So is that the same thing as an innovation hub?
Yes. Hubs, institutes,
Yeah. And,
it is the same.
and the 4 that you've established cooperatively, are they each in different sectors, or are they focused in the same?
So they're in. One of the things that we've tried to do with the early hubs, the early institutes, is invest in cross-cutting technologies that cut across a few sectors. So to give you an example, one of the recent ones that we launched was focused on lightweight and modern metals. That includes companies in materials, that includes the transportation sector, both automotive and aerospace. It includes machinery and equipment manufacturers. So it's quite broad in its touch. And I think that's important for some of the initial institutes as we build this broader network.
Yeah. So are you going to limit it to 4, or are you looking to develop more of these innovation hubs?
Our original proposal was for 15. We've been moving forward with the resources that we have. By the end of the year, we'll have the 4 in place that are up and working. We'll have 4 more that will be launched, or at least the competitions will be launched this year. So we'll have at least 8, and we're continuing to work towards the President's initial goal of 15. I think the potential here is enormous. The competitions for the original 4, there were more than 40 teams that competed for those 4 institutes. So I think the demand here is quite overwhelming.
So it's interesting in that you're in effect saying that national government leadership does in fact play an important part.
It's critical. It can't be done without it.
Because some, of course, in business say that you want government out of the way, not in the way.
Well, you need a catalyzing figure, and you know, in the United States, there is no authority that is more capable of doing that than the U.S. federal government. And you know, it's not a directive. This is a partnership in the truest sense. And so, at the end of the day, it is the companies and the institutions that are in there doing this work that will derive the benefits and bring those benefits forth. But we could not be in there. We certainly could not be doing it in the broader framework across the entire country, city by city, if we didn't have the federal government leading the way and acting as the organizing function. It's absolutely an imperative, and I think that should break out of any kind of political lines. It's a success story, and frankly, I would think that regardless of party, regardless of country, when you see these kinds of success stories, if it's in your interest to pursue a manufacturing sector that is increasingly robust and broad, then you want to take a serious look at this.
Yeah. So I know it's fairly early days, but can you identify any lessons that have been learned through the process?
Sure. A couple of things that are worth noting. One of the things that I think has been an important learning from the process, but also something that was quite surprising was the way that both the AMP, the Advanced Manufacturing Partnership, and the ongoing emphasis about the importance of manufacturing as a part of our economy going forward. That's a new message. It's a new message in the United States, and something that was very much the opposite of what people talked about last decade. At a time when manufacturing was declining, people were talking about the end of the industrial economy. Now people are talking about the importance of manufacturing undergirding our innovation going forward. So you have that ongoing emphasis on the importance of manufacturing. You have a partnership between business, academia, and government, and you're starting to see success in U.S. manufacturing. We've been growing, we've been adding jobs, companies are increasingly looking to bring operations to the United States. And one of the things that's come out of that confluence has been at a local level, almost a replication of the AMP at a state level and at a city level, recognizing that at all levels of government we need an emphasis on manufacturing. For a lot of these regions, manufacturing is the lifeblood of their local and regional economy. And it's something that has eroded over the last 10 years, from 2000 to 2010. So the AMP in a lot of ways has served to inspire activity, both within individual companies and individual universities, not just the members, but others as well, but also at a state and local level, where businesses, academic institutions, government at a local and state level have come together to say, what do we need to do within our own community to drive investment in our manufacturing sector here? What are the things that we need to do for workforce training? Or even simple things like zoning laws. Manufacturing isn't always, especially now with newer technologies, massive factories. Sometimes it can be done at scale at a very small space. And a lot of urban areas have been looking deeply, just as a small example, at zoning laws and how that can bring more manufacturing back into cities. So I think AMP has inspired both the renewed emphasis on manufacturing, but then an enormous amount of activity at a local and state level, far beyond anything we expected when it was originally launched.
Yeah, and I would add to that, from our standpoint, one of the most important lessons is you need to choose committed partners. You have to be persistent. You have to make this apolitical so it doesn't become a punching bag for one side or the other. But persistence in particular. So in this effort, there were naysayers across the spectrum who didn't really give it much attention or didn't think it would go very far. And you have to ignore them, and you have to push forward. And from both the government side and from the business side, you have to realize that this is not just a one-time shot. This is not a couple of speeches. This has to be a dedicated effort, and all sides have to commit resources to it and continue to push. And we've been pushing as a partnership for 4 years now, upwards of 4 years, and we're seeing this success. And frankly, you have to have people who believe in the mission and believe in the possibility of success here. That's what we have here, and I think we're very pleasantly surprised. I don't think in 2010-11 we really envisioned this level of success.
Well, congratulations on the partnership. The partnership is an achievement in itself, I think.
Yes.
And thanks very much for contributing to our conference. And
Sure. Thank you.
I'm sure that your contribution will be debated with great interest here in Australia.
Our pleasure. Thank you.
No worries. Thanks.